Tired of the lengthy instructions on shampoo bottles? Who has the time anymore? Try new hair soap. 2 simple steps. Step 1, wash. Step 2, rinse. That's all you have to do. Hair soap, shampoo for idiots.
Welcome to Abandoned Albums, the documentary podcast. Each week, our intrepid group of researchers and music archivists dig through the record crates of the world, finding those albums that may have been lost over time. If a new artist is discovered along the way, that's all the better. Using a patent-pending algorithm and spirited debate, we pick one album to discuss. Once that is settled, we will invite the artists to Thunderlove Studio to chat with your hosts, Keith R. Higgins and Geoff Calhoun. When we're lucky, they say yes. Our mission with Abandoned Albums is simple: to make sure artists' recorded work remains, or in some cases, lands on, the cultural radar. We invite you to sit back and relax. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks to Geoff, we were able to chat with Tim Quirk, Sandy Smallens, and Jay Blumenfield from the band Too Much Joy. What follows is a career-spanning conversation that covers everything from all of their recorded work, run-ins with the Secret Service, to the obligatory jail time in Florida, and everything in between. The guys were very gracious with their time and their stories, so we won't waste any time. Here is our conversation with Tim, Sandy, and Jay from the band Too Much Joy.
Hey, Troy.
What's up?
Hello, Sandy.
Gentlemen, how are you?
Good, thank you. How are you?
Jeff.
Very well.
Keith.
Good.
You guys.
Nice to meet you.
Guys. Thanks for reaching out, Jeff.
Oh man, my absolute pleasure.
Ours as well.
I'm sorry that it took me this long to realize that you were approachable.
We're so approachable. We're up to a fault, I would say.
Too Much Joy. I confess.
Here we are.
What an amazing band. I want to start off the interview by citing perhaps my favorite record review of all time, which is from Playboy magazine. in 1989 where the reviewer says that hyping Too Much Joy's Son of Sam I Am as the hottest independent rock album of 1989 is like hyping Ozark Ike for hitting 364 in the Piedmont League. If anything, Ike has a better shot at the bigs.
Yeah, we don't understand. We don't speak sports. That just means that someone who really sucks and has no chance of being famous.
It's so
He's a
funny
better
to me.
shot at being famous.
Yeah.
Yeah.
By the way, Ozark Ike did not make
You're
it
right.
to the bigs.
Just as a matter of course, are you guys going to edit this after the fact, or do you just do it straight?
No, I edit. I edit.
And this is where I usually interject and say, feel free to cut that bit about assassinating the president out. But this is something that you all have some experience with in terms of the president and Secret Service. Let's hear that story to start us off.
Here's Tim.
All right, I will tell this story. So one time we were playing, I think it was 96-ish. We were playing a club in DC, and there were a bunch of Secret Service people there. And there were lots of rumors swirling around about who they were protecting. Was it the Gore girls? Was it Chelsea Clinton? Somebody said it was the Prime Minister of Bulgaria, and somebody else said no, it was the Prime Minister of Bolivia. So we didn't know. We just knew that somebody that needed Secret Service protection was in the crowd. So we come out on stage and we start doing our first song. And as I recall, actually, I know because of the story, we were opening with That's a Lie, as we sometimes did, our LL Cool J cover. And it was very disconcerting for me as the front guy because I am used to everybody looking at me. And the Secret Service guys were standing at the foot of the stage, with their arms behind their backs and their little earpieces in. I think they were probably wearing sunglasses, at least in my recollection they were. And there were some other guys on the sides of the room doing the same thing, and everybody was looking at them, which pissed me off. So That's a Lie has a false stop in it, and on record we don't say anything during the false stop because the last lie is now the song is done, and then there's a brief pause and then the song kicks back in. But when we play it live, traditionally we tell a different lie every night, and I always try to make the lie site specific. So I just start extemporizing something about the Secret Service folks and how nobody knows who they're there to protect. And then it sort of morphs into me saying, Secret Service people aren't known for their sense of humor. So I should explain to them that this song is a funny song, and the humor derives from the fact that it is called That's a Lie, and we state various things that are not true. And then my bandmates chime in with the refrain, which is That's a Lie. So that if, for example, I were to say something like, I wanted to kill Clinton, normally that would be illegal, but in this case it would be allowed because my bandmates would kick in with perfect timing and say, and then my bandmates actually did kick in with perfect timing and say That's a Lie. And then we did the rest of our set. And so 90 minutes later, I get off stage and I immediately get detained by the Secret Service and told that I'm in trouble because I've just threatened the president's life. And I try to explain, no, that's not what happened. And so I felt bad. This other guy had to, they were just there. They never told us who they were protecting. I think it was Bulgaria or Bolivia. It wasn't the Gore girls or Chelsea Clinton. So this guy an agent had to wake up in the middle of the night and come down to this club at 1 a.m. And his name was Tim Quirk. And we had a long conversation where he had to determine if I was an actual threat to the president. And I satisfied him that I was not. And they let us go on our merry way to, I believe our show the next day was in Columbus, Ohio. He did tell us we couldn't leave town. I was like, that's not going to work. We're on tour.
Oh, man.
Did you ever figure out why they didn't just stop you in the mid-show and take you off stage? If you were truly a threat, I wasn't there. This is in the period when I wasn't in the band, so I wasn't there and I wasn't singing That's a Lie, although I would have loved to. But why not just pull you off stage? Because
there was no immediate threat to the president. They just had to determine if there is one. And I don't know what their thinking was, but I would assume it's logical that if you're in a sold out club with a punk rock band performing and you try to stop them, the odds of a riot happening are greater than if you just let them finish their set.
Fair enough. And the guy they had to wake up was still asleep, right? So that did get him out of bed.
Yes.
Yeah.
The other thing I learned from that is that when you get interviewed by the Secret Service after threatening the president's life, one of the things they ask you is if you've ever contemplated suicide. And I was trying to answer all the questions honestly, but a little voice in the back of my head said, "Hey, Tim, be careful here."
Yeah.
So rather than answering, I said, "Why is that relevant?" And Tim Quirk very kindly and politely explained that, well, the theory is that if you're willing to harm yourself, you're more likely to harm somebody else.
Really?
And I said, well, can my answer be, I've been 16? And he goes, yes, that is an acceptable answer.
All right.
Fair enough.
Yeah. Interesting.
Not your only, and by the way, this conversation may run the gambit. We're going to be all over the place because your career is a rich one, and there are many worthy stories. Let's stay with politics. I'm curious if you still have the handwritten letter provided to you from Newt Gingrich after Newt and Dick Armey, which is still the funniest name in politics, bar none, supposedly became big fans of the band.
Yeah, we each had our own copy. It's not handwritten. It's it's hand signed. Although it was actually the signature pen. Like he didn't personally sign it. Well,
yeah, actually, we do.
We know it because the guy
who got the letters told us.
Yeah, the weird Republican fan of Too Much Joy.
Oh no! Take that out. He's not weird. He's just.
No, I mean it's weird that a Too Much Joy fan is helped usher in the shithole that we're living in now with Newt Gingrich's takeover of Congress in 1994. That's what I mean by
that's not weird. That's bad. But
yes,
he himself is just
Yes, I don't understand how you connect fandom of Too Much Joy with let's take away everybody's rights.
Yeah, that's a tough connect for me.
Try to bridge the gap for us because it started with theme song, right?
Yeah, so the story of this one is that this Too Much Joy fan worked for the campaign for the Republicans to take over Congress in '94, and one night in the run up to the congressional elections that year, all these Republicans were hanging out in Congress, and Newt Gingrich was sort of giving this rallying the troops speech. And he said, some people say I'm a destroyer, but that's not true. It's just that sometimes in order to build something new, you have to destroy things in the first place. And so this Too Much Joy fan goes, hey, I've got the perfect song to, that says the same thing and to commemorate that. And so he ran and he got his Serial Killer CD, which has a song of ours called Theme Song, the chorus of which goes to create, you must destroy, smash a glass and cry too much joy. And in this Too Much Joy fan's telling, the night ended with everybody, including Gingrich, sort of like drunkenly swaying arm in arm and chanting along with the Too Much Joy song. And in this part may not have happened, but I like the story this way. And then they were all like smashing glasses in the fireplace. And he told us this story when we played a show in DC, and I said, bullshit, I don't believe you. And he said, well, it's true. What would convince you? And I said, give me a signed letter from Newt Gingrich saying it happened, and then I'll believe you. And then the next time we passed through DC, which we did about 4 times a year back in those days, he showed up with a letter addressed to each member of the band and to each one of us.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Amazingly awful. Yeah. I feel bad that we had any association with those shit.
Tim, what I've just realized while you were talking is thank God for whatever your brain is left, because I remember the letter. I could not have told any of the details of that story or any of these stories, frankly. It's all kind of a blur. So thank you, Tim, for being my archive.
Yeah, Tim's always had the killer memory. I mean, this dates back to high school.
Did you grow up together?
We all lived within 2 blocks of one another in a suburb.
The 3 of us.
Yeah.
And then Tommy was the next town over. Okay. Yeah. Ironically, he's the only one who now lives in Scarsdale.
Yeah. He's also the only one with a recognizable New York accent, because one town over, the houses cost a little bit less than ours.
You've always got to outsource the drummer. Why is that?
Well, we started with a drummer from our high school. a 14-year-old virgin, actually. He plays on some of the tracks.
Tim, I think we were all 14-year-old virgins.
I think by the time we were having sex and recording and still recording demos, our Tommy LaRussa remained a virgin, and he was also
Right.
a couple years younger than us.
No, the story about Tommy LaRussa is he had sex before one of the people on this call.
Oh, that's right. That was embarrassing for him.
I don't remember this.
Because he was a couple years younger than us.
Wait, so I was a
Sorry, Jay.
14-year-old virgin too then.
You were a
40-year-old
14-year-old virgin too.
That's funny. That's funny.
With this,
No, Tommy LaRussa was a player, just not a drummer.
He was actually my recollection. He's a pretty accomplished drummer, but he was a little too jazzy for us.
No, he's an incredible musician. He just didn't make sense for our band. We
Incredible
needed someone
musicians
with Tommy's.
do not fit into this particular
Exactly. He was too good for the band.
Yeah.
Tommy's almost too good for the band. Bill Whitman is absolutely too good for the band. The three of us just kind of like co-signed that shit.
The name of the band is cited as inspired from a magic mushroom trip. Any truth to that?
So I'll shut up in a minute. I'll stop telling all the stories and let the other guys talk. But this story is my story, so I will tell it.
Before you say that, I was there too. It is your story because I don't really remember it.
Again.
Yes, I was going to place you in the room, Jay. The first time Jay and I did mushrooms, we didn't know what was going to happen. So we had, we were prepared to create lots of art. There was a guitar in one corner. There were pads of paper and pens and crayons and magic markers for drawings we might do. And, to
Really?
write down any oh yeah.
Well,
And to write down any brilliant
I'm
thoughts we might
so
have.
glad I wasn't there.
for the weeks before this experience, just to backtrack for a second, my father, who's a psychiatrist, had done some research on psychedelics, and I snuck into his office and went through all his old files. And then Tim and I went to the library and bought all the books, or rented whatever you do at a library.
I read before I tripped the first time. I read Aldous Huxley's Doors of Perception, so I knew what I'd be.
Yeah, we did our research, so we were very, very prepared.
We were very irresponsible teenage drug takers.
I thought it was just your older girlfriend got us a bunch of mushrooms and you guys took them.
Well, that happened too, but before I actually ingested
prepped very hard, if you know what I'm saying. And then we anyway, sorry, Tim, go on. Continue.
No, you can explain what happened, and I'll have the denouement.
I say what I remember, and then I shut up.
Okay.
So continue.
Well, so basically, what happened was nothing. I mean, we tripped balls, but we wrote no songs. We drew no pictures. We wrote almost nothing down. We played a lot of music and sort of bounced off the walls for 8 hours. And in the morning, when I sort of woke up, or the next afternoon, whatever it was, in a kind of haze, I remembered having some brilliant thought and writing it down. I was like, okay, I know I wrote down something. And so I grabbed this yellow legal pad that's lying by the side of my bed. And it's so depressing because it's all just spirals and triangular spirals that I was drawing. And so it's just doodles, trippy doodles everywhere. And then in the middle of the page, in teeny tiny letters you could barely read, are just the 3 words, "Too much joy." And we needed a new name at the time. The band was originally called The Rave. And then we decided that was too new wave. And so we briefly called ourselves Tom Tom Makut, which was the name of the Haitian secret police and translates as "I think my aunt is listening to me."
We know that because Sandy went on a vacation to Haiti once and came back talking about that. So we thought it was cool.
You could go to Haiti on vacation in the 80s.
Yeah.
Just to be clear, I wasn't holiday in the sunning. Well, I was, but my parents took me.
Yeah. So, and we decided Tom Tom Makut was too pretentious and hard to fit on posters or flyers. And so it just seemed like that was a good band name. Many, many years later, when I was a parent, one day my daughter, I think she was 9 at the time. So this would have been 2003. She marched into my office, this room that I'm talking to you guys from right now. And she said, "Daddy, how did your band get its name? And there was just something in the tone of her voice that I could tell she'd just been on the internet. And I think our bio
That's your
on
first
All
mistake.
Music, yeah, I think our bio on All Music references this story, or maybe Wikipedia does. I don't know. And I have a policy of not lying to my child, but I didn't want to say, oh yeah, I didn't want to tell her the story I just told you guys. So what I told her was, Abby, every time someone asked us that question, we made up a new story. So I can't even remember which one's real anymore. So actually, I guess.
So you did lie.
Yes, I did. Yes, I did lie.
Nice policy there, buddy.
And then she kind of goes, huh, and turns around and walks away. Of course, now we talk to each other about our psilocybin adventures.
So I hooked my station wagon to their trailer and we drove off together. What Connie felt, she kept to herself. Pulled into a pretty grove of pines and made ourselves comfortable. Then I heard music.
You seem like a group of friends that, and Keith and I think both strongly identify with this. You were smart kids that you could get dumber hanging out with.
It's a good way to put it. I've never heard. I like
100%. Very well said.
I mean, I would say, I listen to music. From the time I was a teenager through to this day, I listen to music, 8 or 10 hours a day. And it's probably just to quiet the voices in the head. So anything you can do to think less is helpful, I find.
I mean, you're
hanging out with each other. We think less. Yes.
Yeah.
100%.
And I'm taking this directly from your website. So I assume one of you wrote it, or perhaps not. But you talk about Ralph Waldo Emerson and the value of retaining the spirit of infancy into the era of adulthood.
That sounds pretentious enough that Tim wrote it, but
Tim wrote it.
No.
If anyone wrote it, Tim wrote it.
No, Alan Scherstl wrote it. That was from the bio.
Oh,
Thanks for me.
so
no. I
Alan's
think Joe Levy wrote it. I think Joe Levy.
Point being, an actual legitimate rock critic wrote that, not Tim.
Okay.
Tim can be that pretentious, but he was not in
a bearded rock critic. Yeah.
Well,
But to your point, we did write our own bios until we could afford to hire people to do it.
Yes.
And we said all sorts of shit.
I don't know if that was his point, but true.
No, I know. Sorry, it's a follow.
Anyway, what was your point? So I think we've taken it completely off.
No, they were saying that. I don't know if one of you wrote it, but some of our better bios were band written, in my opinion, including one that we pretended was written by Greil Marcus. That wasn't, but he said it was okay to. We pretended it. Yeah.
Yeah. Sandy wrote that one, and it was an excellent satire of Greil's.
Well done.
Thank you, and thank you, Tim. And also, I found out his name is Greil.
Yeah. That's why I sort of pronounced it halfway between the two.
Yeah. I didn't know that until
I feel like
last
an idiot
year.
when I pronounce it correctly. So even though I know the correct pronunciation, I can't bring myself to say it.
I didn't know that until last year. I've read his books since I was, a teenager.
Wait, I'm confused. How is it pronounced then?
Greil,
not
Oh,
Grail.
Rhymes with heel.
Okay.
Tim, like you, it sounds like I have a daughter who is starting to ask tough questions about dad's musical experiences and putting things together. We try to be very honest, and so I sometimes will take the perspective on our show of I'm introducing the people that we are talking to my 12, now 13-year-old daughter. So for her, saying this band is like Randy Newman fronting The Clash doesn't necessarily click. She doesn't have the reference. If you were describing Too Much Joy's music to a modern, a 12, 13-year-old child, what references would you use to sum up the band's sound?
Dominic Fike fronting Olivia Rodrigo's band.
I just asked them who their favorite singer was, and when they answered, I'd say it's like that, but funny.
Is the humor part of the band something that? Because I confess that I've read a couple of different interviews. I've listened to a couple of podcasts that you've been on. it seems like the record label and managers and people trying to help you develop the band from a business perspective maybe had some opinions about how funny or how not funny you all thought you were.
Here's bass player Sandy Smallens.
No one really came out and said anything too much. I think the biggest critic of our humor is our band member, Bill Whitman, but pretty much everyone else kind of understood that this is who they are, and there's a reason people like what they do.
But also, I think we sort of have a love-hate relationship with being humorous, because a lot of times we'll have a song that kills me in my soul, and people will be like, that song's so funny, or whatever. And it's just, and sometimes we'll get reviews that like the album, but sort of it's almost insulting that they feel that the humor is almost makes it more disposable, and we see the humor as just pure honesty.
Yeah, I would say, the humor is a piece of what we do, but it's not the sum total of what we do. So I do get irked if people treat that aspect of us dismissively. And what, the phenomenon Jay's describing, we went away for 20 years, 25 years. And when we came back, the first single we came back with was sort of a blistering, angry song about the state of the world in 2020 called Blinding Light of Love. And the very first write-up we got was Too Much Joy Returns with Another Wacky Tune. I was like, what's wacky about it? It's talking about how the world is burning around us.
Wow.
The music was always, I thought, deadly serious. I mean, you guys were a fucking killer band. And if you took the humor out of it, I don't know that it would have had the same appeal.
Well, I think that's because if you took the humor out of it, it wouldn't have been us.
It wouldn't be us.
And we wouldn't have, all bands I like are sort of the sums of the essence of those members, and so we see the world in a certain way, and that's what comes out of the studio speakers.
I mean, I've never been in a battle, or in the army or in a war. But I assume, at least this is the way it gets written about and what you see in movies, if you're sitting in a foxhole facing death, you're cracking some pretty bitter jokes with the people you're in that foxhole with. And, to me, that's what the humor in our songs is like. It's a coping mechanism. It's not everything's great and hilarious and fine. It's, it's the dog, it's the meme. This is fine. It's the this is fine meme. It's like, this is not fine. We're laughing about it because what's the alternative? Utter despair.
It's gallows humor. We laugh and sing to prevent from crying. But even in an earlier song like Kickin' from Son of Sam I Am, it's ostensibly about a kid who's 23 and dying of cancer. I mean, if you take the lyrics literally, and people still thought that was funny. So, because we weren't afraid to be funny at times, especially early on. I mean, on our first record, which was barely a record, it was a collection of demos. We were recording those songs when we were like in 9th, 10th, 11th grade, and just doing stuff to entertain ourselves. So you get a song like Drum Machine, which we still play in concert, or the Otter song, which unfortunately Tim will sometimes perform, which usually means something broke on stage or we're extra drunk. But those were the early sort of markers of the humor, and it it imprinted itself on us, and we don't even struggle with it because I think we don't give a shit. It's like, I don't sit around listening to like funny music. I actually happen to probably like the most dark music of anyone in the band, like very despairing shit. Although actually, I think we all feel that way. But it's just, we got imprinted with it early. We've battled with it, and then we decided to stop battling with it and just be ourselves and just make the music comes out. I mean, Tim writes the lyrics distill his experiences, our group experiences. He's able to put those into words in a way better than, anyone of us could individually, and certainly not in a poetic way that, so we stand by it. We've never consciously tried to be funny. We've never consciously tried to be serious.
I don't think you ever backed away from it through the whole catalog. I mean, I've read you described as whip smart smartasses, and I don't know that you can not be that.
Yeah, they're the. So I was just telling someone this story last night because we were talking about about satirical movies, and I said, yeah, my college essay was super pretentious. It started with a quote from Juvenal, this satirist from ancient Rome, and the line was, his line was, "It's difficult not to write satire." And that's the way I always felt. Like that's what I always gravitated to as a fan. When it came to fiction, deadly serious stuff that made me laugh. Catch-22 is a perfect example of that. Right, that book is fucking hilarious, and it's about some of the darkest shit imaginable.
Yeah. Son of Sam being, if I guess you guys consider it the second full length, Green Eggs and Crack being the first one, Son of Sam being sort of the first big push record, I guess. Tell me about having to recut that record after Bozo the Clown sued you.
I mean, we didn't really have to recut it. We just had to take off some stuff. There's a lot more litigious stuff on that record. And at one point early on, we listed all the people we sampled on the back of the record. And then our lawyer got really mad at us. He's like, why are you doing that? You're giving them a roadmap. But this was 1988, 1989. This is, the Beastie Boys hadn't made Check Your Head. Paul's Boutique yet. Sampling was the wild, and it was a wild Wild West for them as well. But it was, we didn't even think about that. We just thought it would sound cool at this point if we sampled this band, and I'm not going to say their name because there's lots of samples on that record still.
Yeah, and one of them was from Bozo the Clown, who has a habit of threatening anybody who uses the word bozo with a lawsuit. He doesn't necessarily go through with the lawsuits, but so the original Bozo, Larry Harmon, had a lawyer who sent us a cease and desist letter saying, hey, you can't use a Bozo sample on your record. And the timing turned out to be pretty fortuitous because we were in the midst of signing a deal with Son of Sam I Am had come out on an indie label called Alias. We were in the midst of signing a deal with Warner Brothers, and they were going to re-release the record anyway. So they wanted Alias to stop selling all their copies of the record while they repressed it and remastered it. So it was a pretty simple thing to say to Bozo, like, yeah, we're not going to sell that record anymore. It's done. We've ceased. We've desisted. So it was really just a matter of clipping out, like an 8-second intro to the song Clowns.
We did say we were taking it off the record. We didn't say we would continue to make fun of him for the next 40 years.
Yeah, and in fact, next year is the 35th anniversary of Son of Sam I Am coming out. The masters will revert back to us, as a matter of law next year. So we're going, we're just now discussing plans of, what the re-release of Son of Sam I Am that's controlled by us will look and feel and sound like. And, personally, I think we should reinsert the Bozo clip. Let him come after us.
Hell yeah.
Absolutely.
Hell yeah.
And was it the fact that it was Bozo, or was it the fact that it was Bozo saying, I found something in one of my pockets. It was about as big as your shoe, but shaped like a rocket.
I mean,
I think it was off a Bozo record
think?
that I had when I was a kid and I listened to. So like it was him. I mean, it's not like we didn't edit it to make him sound weird. He just
I'm dead serious about this. The reason I want to put it back and I say let him come after us is, to me, that's a perfect example of fair use, in that it's the intro to a song about how evil clowns are. It's a Bozo the Clown saying something that can be interpreted as pretty fucking evil. It is commentary on what he did. It is not the theory behind making samples, something you have to pay for, is that, hey, you're in competition with the people you're sampling. This is not competition. This is commentary. Yeah. Clowns suck. This is proof.
The other song off of that record that I want to talk about is "That's a Lie," which the live version on the live record. I've never been clear, and I'm hoping you can clear up for me. In the live record, you make it sound like LL Cool J is in the room at the concert. Was that a lie, or was he really there? Because I'm still, I half the time I hear it, I believe it.
I don't recall the specific lie, but I can tell you LL Cool J never came to anyone.
No, first of all,
came to our video.
There's-
He was in our video.
Came to our video.
Out of our trailer.
We hung out with him, and we saw him several times since, where he kept calling me Elvis, and so he may have been there that night. So
Wait, why did he call
Yeah.
you Elvis?
I think
Were you wearing sunglasses back then
I
too?
think just like
Maybe he thought Elvis was Jewish.
musician. I don't know.
He thought Elvis was Jewish. Then he should have called me Elvis too. Back in the day, of course. Yeah, listen, that's another example. Why can a hip hop artist make a great song about all the, inflated lies that they tell people to get over, to get laid, to get famous, and then when we do it, it's funny? It was funny when he did it. That's why we loved hip hop.
Yeah, and the story behind that song is we would drive around in our van listening to hip hop, and every time that song came on, we would just look at each other and go, "This sounds like a Too Much Joy song. It sounds like a song we would write." So like, well, let's turn it into a Too Much Joy song.
Nice.
People talk by talking.
The follow up to that record was Serial Killers, and Keith and I have a long standing tradition of discussing what is and is not power pop on this show. I maintain that Crush Story is the best power pop song ever written. It is number one with a bullet on my list.
Well, apologies, Keith. You are very right, and if Keith disagrees with that, he is very wrong.
I'm claiming the win here, Keith.
to the victor go the spoils.
Right. I think that song might be the first time I've ever heard a comma in a song. when you sing "misunderstand me," miss, comma, understand me. Of course, the comma's not in there, but every time I hear the lyric, I go.
I mean, it's on the lyric sheet. I mean,
Yeah.
you were hearing it correctly.
Tim, I think we should start saying comma when we play it live.
I mean, there's a show coming up in a couple of weeks. This is now part of the lyric.
Absolutely.
Hey, Miss Comma. It's happening. If I remember.
It is a truly perfect song in my opinion, and I applaud you for the execution, for the lyrics, for the music, for the whole thing. I think it sums up so nicely a very, very sweet sentiment about that first time that you really have a crush, where your guts go, uh-oh.
I am useless, I am a mess. I am the smallest giant ever. I am the smallest giant ever. Don't know how long it's gonna last. Everything's moving fast. I am the smallest giant ever. I am the smallest giant ever. Everything you've ever said is brilliant. Anything you want to do is fine with me. This is much better than love, babe. This is a crush story. Crush story. Better than love, better than love, better than love.
I am coming up on the on Saturday. In fact, is going to be my 32nd anniversary with the woman that song was written about.
Congratulations. That's amazing.
So in 5 years, she gets freed from Warner Brothers. And we can do whatever we want with her.
It's Berkeley math for you. That's 3 years. Listen, we are the most, myself aside, we are the most loyally married band on earth.
Why yourself aside?
Because I'm divorced.
Okay. I thought you were like,
Although in a very happy new monogamous relationship for many, many years. But
yeah, I think you're right. We beat the odds in that 4 out of, you would think out of 4 of us, 2 of us should be divorced, and out of 5 of us, 2.5 of us should be divorced. But 4 out of 5 of us have been married for decades.
I think a couple of us are working on that, actually.
Very true.
That record was, if my research is correct, the most expensive of the Too Much Joy catalog, in that you spent a lot of time in the studio. You worked with producers that were of more widely known fame. And it sounds to me like you're pretty happy with the process in terms of spending 6 figures on a record.
We spent a lot of money on it, but I think that's also a function of the economics of the industry at the time. To be a successful band, you had to spend a lot of money because that was the only way to get the label to take you seriously, A. And B, we flew out to LA. We were all staying at these, corporate apartments that we can't go back to. And we were making records in like very expensive studios with, a very wonderful and expensive producer, Paul Fox, who sadly is no longer with us. But so I don't think it influenced how we approached, other than Paul's influence of, oh, hey, why don't you guys rehearse and do some pre-production? We still spend a lot of time and effort making records now. We just do it, in our home studios.
But also, I think people, we're sort of come from the punk ethic, or at least those were the bands we loved. But in our heads, the music we made always sounded bigger and sort of more well recorded and all of those things. So when you have an opportunity, we were never sort of the Steve Albini, although I love the guy, just, turn on the amps and put the mics in the right place. We always wanted to have fun in the studio and make it sound gigantic. So having a big budget was great for us, as opposed to a lot of bands who would sort of pretend not to want that. We dreamed of it.
Drop the Needle on the Album Nerds podcast.
It's just the Album Nerds. It's just Album Nerds.
Join Andy, Don, and Dude each week as they discuss albums from themes chosen by the Wheel of Musical Discovery.
Heavy metal guitar virtuosos.
Double albums.
Your MTV Raps.
The top 10 albums of 1986.
Uncover hidden gems, revisit classics, and hear fresh takes on your favorite records.
Exile on Main Street.
Some of what country music can do best is that storytelling.
This is a messy album, for sure.
I just want to hear Floyd and everything, I think.
Born in the USA.
It sounds great overall as an album. I'm just not moved by it.
The Album Nerds podcast. 3 guys talking music.
This is what we call freestyling.
Yes. That's what we call freestyling. No one else would call it that. Other people would call it find another podcast to listen to. Okay, so
give it a spin wherever you find podcasts and albumnerds.com.
We had multiple offers from different major labels, and the two.
2.
No, 3. There was Chrysalis as well. Chrysalis.
I thought that was the same. No, Chrysalis was Danny, wasn't it?
Well, yeah. But I mean, we could have signed. I mean, we could have stuck with. There was Chrysalis, there was Sire, and there was Giant.
Yes.
And so it was really coming down to Giant and Sire. And Sire had a lot going for it in terms of the roster, and like a lot of our heroes were on the label, and getting signed by Seymour Stein personally felt like a coup. But at the same time, the offer was you got $30,000 to make a record, which was only twice as much as what we'd spent on Son of Sam I Am on an indie label. And with Warner, the budget was $125,000. So, we wanted to spend all that money on a record, and literally not a penny of that went into our pockets, unless you count, the per diem we spent on food, feeding ourselves.
And fixing the broken hotel rooms.
Yes.
And vodka.
Yeah. But all of it, I mean, literally every single penny of that recording budget you hear on the record. My only regret is that, we towards the end you said we went in a studio. We went in studios. We were We were finishing recording in Studio A, in this expensive Hollywood studio on Sunset Boulevard, while Ed Thacker was mixing the songs we'd already finished in Studio B, which is a really good way to run up a bill. So we went about $25,000 over budget. And when I was asked, I asked the producer, I'm sort of like the tightwad, penny pinching, keep track of every dollar member of the band. So I was very concerned. I was asking the producer who was in charge. I was like, wait, how are we going to afford this? And he said, oh, don't worry. It comes out of my end. And I'm not saying
he did say that.
Yeah, he did. And I want to be clear about this. I don't think he was lying to me, but it was a mistake for me to believe him. Because what he meant by it was coming out of my end wasn't, oh, you guys will never be charged for this. He just meant what he meant was, I am also investing money that I would have otherwise been paid in this. It really bit us in the butt because the overage came out of our mechanical royalties. So the money we were counting on when we got our next publishing check, which was the money we were living on because we weren't taking any money from the recording budget, it was about $23,000 less than we expected it to be, which was a super fucking surprise. And I had simply not read the contract. I mean, it's a 98-page contract. It's hard to keep track of every single clause. It had been unclear to me, and our manager never explained it to me, and our producer never explained it to me, that by going over budget, we were reducing the size of the next advance we were expecting, which kind of sucked.
Oh, wow.
So that's my only regret, but I am happy the record sounds the way it does.
Is it correct that Paul had come out of the XTC Apples and Oranges session into that record?
Oranges and Lemons,
Oranges and Lemons, yeah.
Which was, by the way, the first big record he ever produced. I learned the other day.
What do you mean by
that? Was
he'd done Yes, and
he'd done a few things. I think it was his first big production. I don't know. Colin Moulding told me when I was talking to him. But yeah, I mean that was one of the records that convinced us that he'd be a great guy to work with. But also, he was just a really good working partner. He was chill. He wasn't one of these dictatorial producers. He was thorough. He'd make you do a million takes, but he wasn't a dick about it. He brought you into the realm. He didn't rule with an iron fist. Yeah. So it was a lovely experience.
Yeah. He had a way of making you do 25 takes without making you think the 24 before sucked. It was just like, you could do even better.
Now, Tim, I heard you earlier refer to Too Much Joy as a punk band. Jay, you have been on record in the past as describing the band as a pop band. Going into that record, did you care about labels? Did you have an aesthetic you wanted to fit into?
I would say by the time we were recording Serial Killers, we had already been described on MTV by Kurt Loder as a punk pop band. And these days the phrase is pop punk. But back then we had never heard the phrase before. We'd never heard anyone describe us that way. And as soon as he said it, we're like, that's what we are. Thank you. Now we know. But that was, even though we had never articulated it that way in our heads, that's what we were always striving for.
But it was less about the label and I mean the label or the words of it was more, we would hear choirs and angels in our head when we wrote the songs, and we still constantly strive to get to this ideal place where the songs are like we hear them, and we don't hear them small, and we don't hear them sort of punk rock or pop
live in the room.
We hear them just Like, honestly, I've never quite gotten there on any of our records, but but we get close sometimes. So I don't think it's really what we are. Like, what we hear in our heads could be described in many different ways. We've never quite got there, but what comes out of us is probably described as punk pop or pop punk.
And when I was a kid, when I was in grade school, before I developed my own tastes, I loved music, but the only music I had to listen to was my parents' record collection, which was Neil Diamond and ABBA, and they had Tommy by The Who as well. And I loved the ABBA records, but what I found was they sounded even better when you played them at 45 or 78 rather than at 33. So I didn't know it at the time, but even when I was 8, 9, 10 years old, I was looking for music that was, just as poppy as what you heard on Top 40 radio in the mid 70s, but was played a lot faster than anyone was playing it yet.
You invented hyperpop and you didn't even know it. That's pretty cool.
Yeah. And I tell you what sells it for me is from a guitar perspective, and full transparency, I am a guitar player. Keith is not a musician, so we listen to music very, very differently. But for me, that record, what takes it over the top and takes it from being a good record to a great record are the backing vocals. I think your harmonies on that record are exquisite.
Thanks.
Thank you. We've never, we've always considered, obviously Tim is the voice of the band, but the way we hear songs is like, we bring in melodies and we end up wanting to sing the melodies we bring in. Like Jay and I will come up with parts. I'm just like, yeah, this should go here somewhere. This should go. And we arrange them together again, more like a hip hop band. I remember reading about the Beastie Boys were talking about the making of their first, record, License to Ill. And they're like, we're the first hip hop band to like comp vocals and like, cut from singer to singer, and everyone would do every part. And then we'd figure out, then the producer would sort through it. We kind of do that as well. We just all hear different parts and we all contribute. Once we started making records with producers, and this started with Michael James on Son of Sam I Am, though, we would have to focus in on okay, well, if I'm going to sing this, you should sing in this interval. And we wouldn't use that language because we don't speak that language, but we would start to figure out which things tended to sound better, sounded good together. And that's something we still do. I mean, we still figure out who's singing the song, when we're in the studio making it, recording it. There are songs that Jay wrote on the last record, or I wrote on the last record, that Tim sings or I sing, or and it has no relevance to who wrote the song because it just was a decision in the moment who sounds best at this part.
Yeah, and then it might all change again live.
Interesting. That's about the same time that I was starting to get into radio and having a little bit of influence in radio. And I've always felt that Susquehanna could have been your big hit lead single if it weren't for the F-bomb.
Well, we sent it to radio without the F-bomb.
Was there a radio mix?
It was the first single from the record. Yeah, there was the first single from that record. We felt the
so
same
you
way.
Agree.
It still didn't become a hit. So, but we tried.
Yeah, no,
it is probably one of our most popular songs. So, I mean, in terms of live.
We replaced the curse with a whip crack.
Did you? Okay. I need a copy of this.
Yeah.
The next record is my favorite Too Much Joy record. I've spent countless hours with Mutiny. There are multiple songs on this record that I feel like should have been mega hits. I wonder if my read on Donna Everywhere is correct. The lyric in the song, the lights went down, the lion roared, and Donna got down on the floor. I wonder if somewhere you have either directly or indirectly influenced Alanis Morissette.
I'm sure she lifted stuff from us. Speaking of, true story, we used to do a punk pop version of Tom Waits' I Don't Want to Grow Up. And we were going to record it, but before we used to play it live all the time. And before we got around to recording it and releasing it, the Ramones released our fucking arrangement of I Don't Want to Grow Up as a punk pop song. I cannot prove
we'd been playing it at CB's, and like them or their friends like were hanging out like that. It was at that time. I'm sure they heard it and stole it. I will say definitively, the Ramones owe us whatever royalties they got.
That's a massive flex, Jay.
On a song none of us wrote.
So, there's a line in a song in Mutiny that goes, "I'm ahead of my time, but only by a week." And we wrote that because shit like that kept happening to us. We would do something, and then, like a month or 3 months later, someone else would do it and get the hit with it.
Yeah.
So basically, when Serial Killers came out, we had KRS-One, rapping on one of our songs. We recorded that album. It did come out for a year after we recorded it because we were still working the re-release of Son of Sam I Am. So by the time it came out literally the same day as REM's Out of Time, which also had KRS-One rapping on it. And the thing is, on our song, he does an actual verse, right? Like with actual words. On REM's song, he just goes, yo, 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 hey, hey, hey. Which is, to my mind, a waste of the almighty blast.
No, I want to ask you guys about your exposure to hip hop. Now, Scarsdale, I live on the East Coast. I live in New Haven, Connecticut. So I'm familiar with Scarsdale. I don't necessarily equate that as a hip hop hotbed. How did you guys get exposed to it?
I think we were ahead of our time, but only by a week by being white kids who were listening to hip hop. Like that's a few years later, that was everybody, but we were the OGs.
Yeah. I mean, that was really, it started more out in college for us. Hip hop really wasn't present in any way that would be on our radar when we were in high school or in Scarsdale.
Apart from the message, I remember when WNYU would play the message for the first time. Like I literally had to stop my car and go, "What?" I think
White Lines too, right?
Yeah, but that was more of like that was more commercially successful. I feel like than the message was still pretty underground-ish anyway. But yeah, it was mostly. I mean, it's funny you say New Haven because most of that stuff was brought into the van by Sandy and was picked up in New Haven at college.
Fair enough.
Nice.
But to me, I've said this before elsewhere, but the first Clash record changed my life because it was a sonic assault unlike anything I'd ever heard before. I mean, like the Ramones were fast and loud, but the Clash was fast and loud and angry in a way that just connected with me at a gut level, like nothing else ever had before. And hip hop to me was the same thing. Right, like the Clash we're suburban kids in an upper middle class suburb. The socioeconomic stuff and political stuff the Clash was singing about was about as far removed from our actual world as it could possibly be, and yet it sounded like they were singing about me and my life. Right? I felt connected to it. I would say the exact same thing about hip hop. Even if they were singing, about slinging coke on a street corner, and carrying an Uzi or something, that wasn't my life. But the sonic assault, it was expressing, the confusion and alienation that was in my brain, and it was just so word drunk. How could guys like us not fall in love with something like that? It was smart and witty, even when it was being like really grim and serious.
Cool.
Speaking of Donna Everywhere, tell us about the friendship with Penn Jillette, who directed the video for that song.
Actually, Teller directed.
Oh, really?
They sort of directed it together, but Teller was the official director, and when
he actually talks.
Yeah, he's the guy who officially doesn't talk, but once you get him going behind the scenes, he doesn't stop. But they were very cool, and they were fans, and they knew a guy who lived in Kansas who had like the first video digital editor. It's called a video toaster. That was way before Premiere and Avid and everything. And so we got to work with the latest technology from Penn's friend and had a great time.
For some reason, and it's not too hard to figure out, it's a blessing and a curse, but we don't have famous musician fans for the most part. We have very famous comedian fans and funny magician fans and stuff. Bobcat, Goldthwait, Penn and Teller, even more recently, Rob Corddry.
Yeah, he wrote people like that was nice.
Fucking amazing. Yeah. So, given I guess the comedians tend to like us. Actually, it was like a Bobcat on Penn and Teller battle to be the director of that video. Bobcat had other songs and things he wanted to make for us, and he brought us onto his late night show one night, and we played, and he got mad at us because we were too drunk. But other than that, I think we're still in good terms.
I don't remember Bobcat getting mad.
I don't think he.
Yeah, because we were very. He did.
I don't remember
Bobcat
him
is sober. He's militantly sober.
By the way, I don't remember
way.
he had a talk show or that we were on.
It wasn't.
It was a late night special.
It was a comedy special on Fox.
What's that?
It was a late night special.
Oh, okay.
And Bobcat's quite an accomplished
but no, you'll remember he kept coming into the dressing room before we were going to play, and he's like, "Are you sure you guys okay? You're drinking a lot." I'm like, "But this is our process. Just let us be."
Respect.
I respect process. Yeah, I just let it be. But I respect the sobriety, and certainly God bless. But anyways, so funny people like our band.
Smart people.
Funny people. Yes, smart, famous, great people. Beautiful.
When I reached out, I think I mentioned in my email, for the life of me, I will never understand why Magic was not a massive international hit. To me, that song is magic. It clicks for me in some kind of way. I'm curious to hear if you have any thoughts on that song.
I like your feelings about it. That's pretty awesome. I wish you decided to become like the head of, Sirius Radio or something that would actually help that all become a hit. Or couldn't you have owned a record company or a promotion company or something? Like, where were you when Magic came out?
I would say I share your high opinion of that one. There's some songs where like, we didn't quite do it with that one, or that one didn't quite turn out as good as I think it could have. But Magic accomplished everything I personally wanted it to.
Agreed.
Remained in the set to this day. It's often a concert opener. I remember composing the lyric. I was literally walking home on the train tracks. And it was not a dangerous thing. I was drunk, so it was semi-dangerous because if I tripped and fallen and passed out, I could have gotten run over. But I knew the trains had stopped running after midnight, and it was like 2 a.m. So I was like, I've got 4 hours before, and it was the fastest way home. It was the straightest path between the bar where I'd been at and the apartment where I was living at the time. And it was winter, and it was.
Oh, is this when you lived on Sagamore?
When I lived in Tuckahoe, yeah, and I'd been drinking. Drinking in Bronxville, and so the fastest path back to my apartment was to, just jump on the tracks at the Bronxville train station and walk partway to the Tuckahoe station, and then I could just run up the hill through a fence to my apartment. And as I was walking, I was like, this is probably a stupid thing to do, but it's sort of like, Jay and I, the mushroom story. Like, we did all our research before figuring out which psychedelic to take before we took one for the first time and making sure it was safe. It's the same thing. Like, walking home on the train tracks when you're drunk is probably a stupid thing to do, but I was doing it about as safely as you possibly could. But that's where the beginning of the song started, came from. And I think most of it got written on the walk home.
Down train tracks, drunk at 3 a.m. It's no great trick, it's not magic when the trains don't run till 6.
Let's talk about reunion and how you find yourselves releasing new music as recently as last year. I'm a huge fan of What Pricks We Were. You've got half the band on the West Coast and half the band on the East Coast. This is not like, oh, well, we all live in the same town. Let's get back together in Tim's basement again. There was a concerted effort to put Too Much Joy back together. Tell me about that.
The same problem everyone had in 2020. We were fucking going stir crazy, locked in our houses. A lot of us had worked, remotely or whatever in the first place. So we just had started throwing ideas around. It was sort of like this tender sort of like, I don't know, I kind of wrote this thing. You want to check it out? And it happened. It wasn't a deliberate like, oh, let's reunite. It was like, we just started sending things back and forth.
It's basically Bandcamp's fault. Early on in the pandemic, they started their First Fridays thing, where on the first Friday of each month, they took no commission from any sales. And so it happened one month and, we weren't a part of it. And I just saw the reaction to it. I was like, oh, for the next First Friday, I'm going to have a bunch of Too Much Joy stuff for sale. So I just trolled through the archives and found a bunch of stuff that just had never been released digitally, and that we controlled the rights to. So I just put a bunch of rarities up for the next First Friday. And it was frankly shocking how, and then we did a little post on Facebook, the Too Much Joy Facebook page. That has maybe 2,000 followers, something like that. And I feel like every single one of them bought, the tracks that we put up. And so I was sort of sharing the results with the guys. I was like, look at this. This is crazy. And Sandy was the one who said, well, maybe next month we should give them an actual new song. And he had a riff he'd been working on and said, maybe you could write some words for this. And so then we shared it with the other guys. And it very quickly, I think because everybody was just stuck at home going crazy, like a process that, in some other circumstance might have taken 3 months to result in anything meaningful, took 3 days to have a completed song. And from there, and we weren't, and even then it was just like, oh, let's just have a song for next First Friday. But at the same time, I was like, there's a bunch of songs we recorded, we wrote but never recorded back in the day. So why don't we revive one of them, do a version of it, do a studio version of it and make that the B-side of this new song. So we did that. And the reaction of that was even better than the reaction of the old stuff. Like, we made so much money by our standards, which are not.
We did.
How do you think we kept recording? That's what was funding everything. Yeah. It was, and that was so much fun. We're like, you know what? And by that time, I think it was July. And we're like, you know what? If we do this every month now through Christmas, one new song and, one old song that never got recorded and released, we'll actually have an album by the end of the year. And so it was, it was 2 or 3 months into the process that we came up with, that we set a goal for ourselves, and it wasn't a super ambitious goal. It was basically like, let's write 5 or 6 new songs and record 5 or 6 old songs that nobody else but us has ever heard before, and it can sort of be like a side A and side B. And what was nifty about it was the old stuff started informing the new stuff and vice versa. And by the time we were done, and before you knew it, again, I think a combination of we hadn't really worked together. We sporadically here and there for shits and giggles, if we were all in the same town, we'd run into the studio and like bang out a cover, for a record store day tribute album or something. So it wasn't like we'd done nothing for 24 years, but we hadn't made a concerted effort to make new music for 24 years. And so by the time we were, just starting the process, unleashed something. And by the time we were done, we had 40 songs. And I think only like 2 or 3 old ones wound up on the record. When the original idea had been like 5 new ones and 5 old ones. And before you knew it, we had like 35 new ones and 5 old ones.
Wow.
Yeah. I mean, I didn't clock the economic impetus, but because Tim is really the man with the visor in the band who keeps track of that stuff. I will say that, I don't think any of us ever stopped writing music. I don't want to speak for you, Jay, but like I had riffs aplenty, and the lyrics for that first song that we did, Pong, those had existed in many different forms, as did my riff that we were putting to it before we even started. And it just all of a sudden it clicked. Tim said, I'm just going to simplify this chorus, and let's just make it work. And then we did, but it was still high pandemic when we made mistakes were made. So it was like, first of all, convincing producers and other people in the band to actually go into a studio with masks on and just like be together when we record rhythm tracks. Because the one thing you can't record at home, we can't record at home in any concerted way, is drums. So if Tommy's going to go in and record drums, he needs to have a pretty good sketch of the song or a demo of the song to lay the drums down to. Then, we take it back to our own labs and fuck with it. And then Bill would put it all together and yell at us about how shoddy our recording process was. Fair, and deservedly so. I mean, I think we've all gotten better at it now. I mean, we could, as long as we can record drums somehow, we could make an album and never see each other in person. I think a lot of people in the band would prefer it that way, but not me. I like to be in the room, but now we've gotten just good enough. Like Tim self-records, I self-record, Jay self-records. Jay's son is a musician and producer who helps him. Tommy's son, well, I don't know if Tommy's son helps him do anything, but he is a musician. And Bill has a fat-ass studio in his house 5 minutes away that I've never seen.
We went through this entire conversation, and I never brought up the Two Live Crew thing. I would like to touch on that briefly, just because I don't want anyone to think that the band's politics lean in the Newt Gingrich direction. When Two Live Crew were arrested, you all jumped to support them and performed a concert. Were you closer to actually being arrested in the Two Live Crew thing or the Secret Service thing? Because it sounds like
we got arrested. We went.
You
to
were
jail
actually booked.
Two Live Crew.
We went to jail. Yeah.
Yeah, we went to jail and went on trial and were acquitted. It was a shitty time for the music industry.
Help me understand what exactly happened. Talk us through who don't know the Two Live Crew story.
Tim, you do it.
Okay, so back then, what was it, 90? 1990, 1990? Yeah, 1990.
91?
Yeah, 90 or 91. Florida was Floridaing.
Florida's going to Florida.
It's being its whack-ass self. And a judge in Florida had issued a ruling that Two Live Crew's album, As Nasty As They Want to Be, was obscene, which is completely anti-constitutional and stupid and wrong. But it was briefly the law of the land in Florida. And they immediately started arresting record store owners, or a record store owner who was selling the album, and then they arrested Two Live Crew when they performed some of the songs from the album in concert. This is horrifying, crazy shit that happened in America. I mean, less surprising.
Yeah, let's see.
Less surprising today than it was back in 1990, but still shockingly wrong. And we were in the middle of recording Serial Killers when it was happening. So we were by that I mean we were sitting in the lounge getting stoned and watching Star Trek: The Next Generation and MTV News while Paul and Ed Thacker were mixing the songs.
Yeah. Exactly.
So we're watching like the news about Two Live Crew being arrested, and I think Sandy was the one who said we should go down there, and do a protest concert of all Two Live Crew songs and see if they arrest 4 white guys for singing the same things. And our publicist was standing in the room at the time, and she goes, "That's a great idea." And so we
also my ex-wife, by the way, just to be clear.
That wasn't such a great idea.
No.
Don't say that to my kids, Jay. Fuck you.
So anyway, as we're brainstorming this, like it turns into this
See you
great
next
thing.
year.
We're like, we should get all these different alternative rock acts to go down. We'll book the same club, and REM and Sonic Youth and Too Much Joy will all go down.
We reached out to Bon Jovi and Madonna.
Yeah, we'll all do one Two Live Crew song. Nick Navarro, the sheriff in Broward County, will have to rent 10 school buses to cart us all off to jail if he even dares to arrest us. And we fell in love with the idea, and before we knew it, we booked the club. We had a date, and we announced our plans before we'd actually gotten anyone else to commit. And so all of a sudden, all these bands that were like, "Oh yeah, that's a great idea," we're like, "Oh, I'm booked that day," or "Yeah, I don't think so." I remember I personally asked Peter Hook from New Order, because we were at some Warner Brothers party in the bathroom, and I said, "Look, we're going."
Which is when you always talk to rock stars.
Absolutely.
Always when you're peeing.
Yeah, and so I asked him to join. He goes, hey, "I won't do the British accent," but he goes, "No, mate, I've been in the Nick enough as it is." And so we wound up having to do it by ourselves, which made it look like it was nothing but a publicity stunt. But it was our attempt to say, "Hey, this fucking law is crazy and needs to be reversed." And I'm proud to say it had the intended effect. We got arrested. We spent a night in jail. We got some ACLU lawyers pro bono to defend us. We each had our own. And we had a 3-day trial in Florida. And the jury acquitted us in 15 minutes. And they said it would have been faster, but some of them had to go to the bathroom. And as soon as the verdict came out, the DA said, "I'm no longer prosecuting cases like this. The people have spoken."
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
I want to correct the record about one thing. There's one band that did agree to go, but then by that time we were like, "Oh, let's do it ourselves." And that band is 24/7 Spies.
Okay.
Really? I thought it was 11th Stream Day for some reason.
No, they didn't like us at all.
But
We
you
were
don't
selling
have to like
t-shirts
us.
during their set.
You don't have to like us
I
to
know.
do the show.
Maybe them, but I specifically remember 24/7 Spies going, "Yeah, we'll do it."
Oh, why didn't
And
we?
we're just like, just kidding.
Wait, that's
Really?
a band?
I
Yes.
have no recollection of 24/7
I-
Spies saying it.
I do remember that.
I
And if I
remember-
remember it probably happened because I don't remember anything.
No, my recollection was that there was one band that was at our level in our genre that said yes, and I'm like, well, that's not
One
sexy.
could say they're in our genre.
Can we name the band?
I said 24/7 Spies.
Okay.
Were they were sort of in our genre. I don't remember.
Well, thank you.
Anyways, I just feel bad because we always say no one wanted to do it, and I want to correct the record.
And
Sonic Youth said no for sure. Sonic Youth said
Other
no.
people wanted
Peter
to do
Hook
it. They just had
definitely
better PR people who said, maybe you shouldn't do it.
We learned a lot in jail.
Yes, protect your milk is the main lesson.
And that's not even code.
Somebody stole Sandy's milk.
now, wait.
I was very thirsty.
Isn't Tommy a cop?
Yeah.
Yeah. Tommy barely escaped arrest.
So Tommy
he
was
snuck out.
he was willing to get arrested, and I'm still proud of him for that to this day.
Yes.
But he was cleaning up his drums on stage while we were hanging out backstage. And so
No, dude.
because we always just leave him to do all the heavy lifting, and the cops came in wearing Hawaiian shirts and
And
said-
fingerless gloves because
Fingerless
that's
gloves,
where you
and they're
punk rock.
obese,
and
just like they are today.
and they said they gather us up, and then one of them goes, well, I think there was a fourth one, and then the other one's like, no, he didn't sing, and then another one said, yeah, but I saw him mouthing the words, and then they looked around for him, they couldn't find him, and they took us away, and he was still on the stage cleaning up his drums.
No, that's not. He wasn't. I just found out recently he had run out right after the set to the bar next door so that he could avoid getting arrested. Someone else was breaking down his drums. He was strategically hiding
I
out.
believe my story. I don't care if Tommy told you otherwise. I'm sticking with my story.
Did he think that he would lose his job as a police officer?
He would have lost his
Yeah.
job if you get arrested for a felony. At least when back in the day. Nowadays they probably give you a promotion, but in New York, that would have been the end of his job.
Especially in Florida, right?
Boy, how is it possible? Florida's a shittier state now than it was in 1990. It's fucking. At least they got rid of that the trans care ban, but fuck Ron DeSantis. Just if our politics aren't clear, fuck Ron DeSantis.
It's funny. It's funny you say felony, Sandy, because it was supposed to be misdemeanor charges.
Yeah.
And they were so pissed at these, uppity New Yorkers coming down and telling them their business that they charged us with felonies, mostly so they could scare the shit out of us and put us in the scary cell with the real fuckers.
Where our new friends. Those guys are our friends. We're pen pals with them. They're still locked up, of course.
No, I mean, but it's actually true. They threw us in there thinking like, oh, these guys are going to learn a lesson. We get in there and everyone's like, what are you doing here? And we explain what we did. And they're like, yo, Luther's my buddy.
I think they were all distant relatives of Luther Campbell. Yes.
We were basically heroes in the felony cell.
Which
was nice for like 3
We were
guys.
hungover and wearing day glow. It was a mess. It was terrible. And they took my milk.
That is
one guy took your milk.
Amazing, gentlemen.
That's all it takes.
And I am really enjoying the visual of picturing the three of you singing, "Hey, we want some pussy." It's good stuff.
Well, unfortunately,
the problem is
we were able to see the police videotape of the show during the trial, and we should have gone to jail for that.
Yeah. We were so fucking nervous. We were all drunk before we played, which we don't usually do, but we were pretty nervous, and the performance was fucking horrific.
Yeah,
I think we were rehearsing using their music like through the monitors so we could like sing along. We should have performed like that too, because the songs actually work if you know what you're doing. Right? We did.
It's true. During the trial, we had to sit through the entire performance, and it was literally the only moment. I mean, the thing is, the law is so crystal clear. In order to convict us of an obscenity charge, there's a 3-pronged defense, and if the state couldn't prove that any one of the 3 things wasn't true, we got off. That's the way the law works. So one is it couldn't be a political protest. I literally introduced the show by saying, welcome to our political protest. So like, that's the end of the case right there. It was really funny watching the DA try to get around that. He goes, he's talking to the jury. He goes, despite the singer's self-serving assertion that this was a political protest, it was not a political protest. Like, great argument, dude. The second was it had to appeal to the prurient interest, which meant that we had to turn people on. Duh, that was not happening.
Not happening.
And number 3 was it had to have no redeeming artistic or social merit. One thing they could have maybe gotten us on. But,
yeah, they definitely could have gotten
No, except our expert witness was Anthony DeCurtis.
He was your expert
Thank you,
witness?
Anthony.
That's
great. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, dude.
And it was great. And the thing
He
is,
showed up.
it was listening. So as depressing as watching the performance was during the trial was the one moment I actually thought the jury might convict us just for sucking and ignore the law. The flip side of that coin was listening to Anthony DeCurtis give this really intellectual dissertation about our music. And so like one of the songs we did was because we had to fill out the set. I think we did like 5 Two Live Crew songs, a couple of Too Much Joy songs that fit in, like our cover of That's a Lie. And then we ended with
Please on My Back.
Yeah. No, we ended up with I Fought the Law.
I Fought the Law.
Yeah. And so Anthony DeCurtis is explaining that what was interesting about our version of I Fought the Law was that we weren't covering Bobby Fuller 4's version of I Fought the Law. We were covering the Clash's version of I Fought the Law. And so he's drawing these connections between, the original song, the Clash, us, and hip hop, and making it all make sense. And by the time he was done, I was like, we have redeeming artistic and social value. I'm so proud of us. And the other high point was when the the assistant district attorney who was trying the case was so bad at his job at one point, because one of the things you learn just from watching TV is if you're a lawyer, you never ask the witness a question you don't already know the answer.
Don't know the answer.
But he goes, "How much are you being paid for your testimony?" And Anthony Curtis goes, $0. And the ADA goes, really? And then Nudie Curtis goes, oh, yes, they offered to pay me a fee, but I feel this is so important that I'm doing it for free just because I believe in the First Amendment. As soon as you could just see on the ADA's face, he's like, oh, shit, I stepped in that one.
Wow. That's exciting.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Absolutely amazing. Well, gentlemen, I've loved the band for a very long time. I'm so tickled that you were able to join us for an episode. Thank you for all of the music, and here's to the potential for more. It seems like it's a very real potential, and that you still enjoy one another and enjoy making music together. And so I'm ready for the next one. Bring on another TMJ record.
All right. Thanks for the props.
We'll work on it.
Thank you guys. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you guys. It means a lot to us that you still care about us in 2024. Thank you.
Still spin it all the time. Let's repress some vinyl, eh?
It's too expensive.
It is terribly cost prohibitive.
Yeah.
I can confirm. But folks, thanks so much. Appreciate Too Much Joy. We'll see you next time.
All right. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you, guys.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Many thanks to Sandy, Tim, and Jay for taking the time out to share the Too Much Joy story with us. Be sure to check out the show notes for links to everything mentioned in this podcast.
This episode of Abandoned Albums was written and produced by Keith R. Higgins and Geoff Calhoun. The show was recorded at Thunderlove Studio, where it was engineered by
Daphne Morris,
with help from
Penetration.
Abandoned Albums was edited by
Vic Titball,
with help from
Clem Fandango.
At the beginning of this podcast, you were treated to a diverse selection of music, including the soulful sounds of Forever by Little Steven and the Disciples of Soul, the indie vibes of Velvet Roof by Buffalo Tom, and the raw energy of Nevermind by The Replacements. Our theme song is Kiss the Earth by The Renegades. You can stream all of these artists wherever you stream your favorite music.
The songs you heard during this podcast were Sort of Haunted House, Clowns, That's a Lie, Crush Story, Suska Hoyu Hat Company, Donna Everywhere, and lastly, you heard Magic. You can stream Too Much Joy wherever you stream your favorite music. Be sure to check out the show notes for links to the band's Bandcamp page. Please remember to support independent music.
Original music by Mike Pellegrino.
If you like what you've heard, please remember to subscribe and leave us a rating. It helps other people find the podcast. Thanks for listening.
Grazie.
Bailey Leaf,
Rob Janicki, Mike Pellegrino, Farina Vella,
Eric Beatner, S.W. Loudon, Ronnie Barnett,
Michael Janicki, Peyton Janicki.
This show's executive producer is Lulu McGillicuddy and is in the loving memory of...
This is Thunderlove.
Abandoned Albums receives funding from Damon Pharmaceuticals, the makers of Ben Affleck. Ben Affleck is the only chewable tablet made to combat stomach unease associated with mediocrity. Taken daily, Ben Affleck can help combat explosive gastrointestinal shame. You can find a multitude of flavors in the incontinence section of your local pharmacy. Ben Affleck, save yourself the embarrassment.
The side effects include dry mouth, headache, anal leakage, muscle soreness, bad decisions, gender confusion, constipation, evil spirit possession, and banality. Use only as directed.
And now, until we meet again next time, I remain as always, obediently yours.
Abandoned Albums is a production of Paw Print Media.